China is warning that it will not sit still while the United States rebuilds its spy network inside of Chinese borders. So, for a little context, between 2010 and 2012, China killed or imprisoned between 18 and 20 CIA sources. But recently, CIA Director William Burns said that the agency is going to build that back up. China says, no, you're not. We're going to watch this and make sure it doesn't happen. So, joining me to discuss this is Carl Zha, an expert on Asian politics and host of the Silk and Steel podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Natalie, for inviting me.
So, can you break this down for us? Why is the US so brazen in announcing a spy network in China? Isn't that kind of not what you do when you have spies? You don't announce it?
Exactly. We know like this is what nation state do. That everybody spy on everybody, and we also know that U.S. intelligence agency listening in on everyone. They tap the phone of Angela Merkel, and we also know NSA read our emails. Yours and mine both.
Yes.
But normally they don't come out in public and admit it, and so this is quite unusual. And of course, as you mentioned before, just back in 2017, New York Times or Wall Street Journal, they broke out a big story that's the China decisively broke CIA spy ring in China. The New York Times estimated about 20 people got either arrested or killed, and and against in fact, a CIA officer, Jerry Chong Shin Lee, was convicted in U.S. for spying for China and sentenced to 19 years in prison. But William Burns, the director of CIA, now openly announced that we are going to build up our spy networks back up in China. So first of all, China and U.S. are not at war. Officially, it's not two hostile nation yet, but they're already acting as if it's already a fact. And they're already acting as if Cold War 2.0 is a already given fact. And this is why they're so brazen and come out and say, oh, yeah, we're going to build up our spy ring network back up in China. And of course, the Chinese foreign ministry is going to respond very strongly and say, no, we're not going to let you do that. So right now, what we have is, the CIA working with other U.S. intelligence services and the so-called Five Eye countries. The Five Eye countries are UK, U.S., Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and these countries are the so-called Anglo Five Eyes because they all share intelligence among themselves. And U.S. is taking a lead to starting on this anti-crusade. We talked about this before. This started about from 5 to 6 years back. Actually, it went back as far as I would say early 2009 when Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State under Obama administration. When Hillary uh, pioneered the so-called pivot to Asia. And when they talk about pivot to Asia, it's not a pivot of U.S. investment to Asia. It's pivot of U.S. military asset to Asia. I mean, ever since U.S. has doubled down on its containment policy versus China, um, we saw the formation of the AUKUS alliance with
Yes.
Australia. Okay, we saw the Quad, which is Japan, Australia, India, and with specific purpose of containing China. And add on top of that, we also have an economic war that's waged on China currently by the U.S. global ban of advanced semiconductor equipment to China. Whether the company, it doesn't matter whether the company is South Korean or in Taiwan or in Netherlands, they're all banned to have any kind of business with China. So now we're entering a very dangerous territory between the Sino-American relationship ever since I would say the 1972 Nixon visit. And this is another reason Henry Kissinger was invited back to China just a few days ago, because he was a man originally went to China in 1970 to set up the Nixon visit. And now I think the Chinese leadership is hoping to talk to him by using his whatever perceived influence in U.S. establishment to maybe talk down the war hawks in U.S. and to restore some semblance of stability in this relationship. Right now, there's really no floor in in the Sino-American relationship right now. It's a free fall,
Yeah.
and it's a very dangerous path to go down, especially when China, U.S. are both nuclear powers, and now we have the commander of the U.S. Seventh Fleet openly talking about possible hot war conflict over Taiwan.
Right.
He said, recent talk, he said, basically we have two tasks. One is to deter China, and if that is not successful, then we're committed to fight a war. I mean, all these very this very hostile talks so openly in public. This is not a very healthy sign in the
Right.
relationship.
Now, we know that one of the things that set Edward Snowden on his path to figuring out how the US government was spying was because he was asked to do a report on how China spies. And he said, well, there's no way we know this and don't do it ourselves. So he went to seek it. We know that the NSA has also planted backdoors in Huawei equipment, such as routers and switches and smartphones. We know this from New York Times reporters Nicole Perlroth and David Sanger. And so the US is already spying in China. And yet we're upping the rhetoric about China spying on us. That's what those words together mean, is spying, is Chinese spying. So is this truly a both ways thing that's just already been happening? But if we talk louder about them spying on us, then we can do it with impunity?
I like to say, a lot of the talks in US media about China is 100% projection. As you have pointed out, because we are already doing this to them, so we assume they must be doing it to us. I mean, that is a rationale for banning Huawei in the first place. They're banning Huawei. They say, well, the Chinese security agencies can backdoor through Huawei. Well, that's because US already have backdoor through all our, tech
Right.
companies.
They exploited
And,
it.
and exactly. And but right, it's nation state, they spy on each other. That's what they do. But normally they're not so open and brazen about it. And you only see this kind of during, like, say, the Cold War, during the first Cold War with Soviet Union. But unfortunately, I think we're in a situation right now. We are unfortunately in an incipient Cold War 2.0. That's why we're not like openly talking about rooting out Chinese influence in our society, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever happened, the open market of ideas, a marketplace of ideas, right? It's now it seems like, oh my God, we can't have any kind of Chinese influence because some kind of special Chinese contagion. It touches all, it corrupts, which is totally bogus, right? And right now, that's really also a lack of confidence, I think, among the U.S. ruling
Sure.
elite. What is our ideas, our ideals is not competitive enough. Like
Right.
we cannot. That's why we have to shut down any kind of alternatives. So people don't get ideas. And
Yeah.
yeah, unfortunately, that's just where we are right now.
Well, my belief is it disadvantages all of us if we don't learn to get along, because there are advantages to be had from foreign collaborations. Now, in April, we learned about these secret Chinese police stations in New York City. We're being told about the Chinese spy balloon. Again, what is your take on those things? Is this, again, just increasing of rhetoric that they spy on us?
Yeah, this is interesting, right? The spy balloon is all over the news. And then I think just a few weeks ago, Pentagon released a statement that said the Chinese spy balloon did not collect any intelligence data on
Right.
US. So what they're saying is the Chinese spy balloon did not spy. Well, wouldn't that just make it a regular balloon, like what the Chinese officials are claiming?
Yeah.
And and also the Chinese police secret police station story. That's everywhere. It's in U.S., also in Canada. It's also in Australian press. They all reported it, and people did some investigation on this claim. First of all, the claim or initially surfaced their source is again U.S. intelligence services or Canadian intelligence services or Australian intelligence services. Part of this Five Eye network of spy services that work together, and when the people there's some people who actually did investigation on okay what are actually talking about, and now these they're talking about the services that they that's offer for Chinese tourists in United States, how to extend their visa, how
Oh,
how they can accommodate these the newcomers into U.S. Just help the Chinese tourists in U.S. to navigate. But uh, right now, this is actually all this rhetoric is actually have a very negative impact, not only just on the Sino-American relationship, but before all this crazy talk about secret Chinese police station on United States, China and US law enforcement actually were in cooperation together to track the fentanyl precursor chemicals that's produced by Chinese pharmaceutical companies, because those chemical precursors they are produced as part of ingredient for normal pharmaceuticals, and Chinese pharmaceutical company just happen to, they, everything is offsourced to China. So Chinese pharmaceutical company have a large global market share of making those pharmaceuticals, and a lot of the gangs based in Mexico they are importing these chemicals from China and then processing them into fentanyl and ship them across the border. As we know, there's a big fentanyl crisis, opioid crisis in U.S. right now. So there
yes. My
was
sister
a
used to live
agreement.
in Puerto Vallarta, and that's a port for a lot of those illegal drugs. It's not a safe place to be for that reason.
Yeah. And so U.S. and China law enforcement agency for years has set up a program where they will the shipments from the Chinese pharmaceutical factories of these chemical precursors that could be used to make fentanyl, because for the Chinese pharmaceuticals, they just sell off these ingredients to whoever buyers. They don't necessarily follow through to see where they ultimately end up. So they had a program to track all these shipments of fentanyl, all these chemical precursors, to see where they end up. Now, because of all this crazy talk about Chinese police stations, secret police station in North America, that program has ended. There's no
Jeez.
more cooperation among China and U.S. law on tracking those chemical precursors that could be used to make fentanyl. Which is making the
Yeah.
crisis much worse.
Right. Okay, well, you just proved the point that collaboration with China would offer us all a lot, and this
Yes.
rhetoric does not. So, thank you so much for your perspective on this. I really appreciate it. And you can follow Carl Zha. I like to switch my words today. It's a fun game. We can follow you on Twitter at Carl Zha, or are you now real Carl Zha? You went back and forth, right?
I created the real Carl Zha because my first account was hacked for a while, and
Yeah,
it took me a while to get it back. So I'm
but
back to
you're
the
back
Carl
now.
Zha account now.
Okay, at Carl
I'm
Zha.
back.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.